Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Van Ostren, and on behalf of ACRL and Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Information Literacy and Teaching Strategies, sponsored by World Bank and featuring Brett Cloyd and Devika Levy. Today's discussion is one in a series of sponsored webinars from ACRL and Choice that addresses new ideas, developments, and products of interest to the academic library community. Free to users, these 60-minute live presentations provide the opportunity for interactive discussions of important new issues and developments in academic librarianship. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few features of the webinar software. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. You will also see a Q&A panel that you can use to submit questions or comments. Please feel free to submit these throughout the program. And finally, please note that today's program will be recorded and all registrants will receive follow-up instructions on how to access the archived version. And now for some background on today's speakers. Brett Cloyd is currently the Reference and Government Information Librarian at the University of Iowa. His job responsibilities include Librarian Liaison for Political Science, Geography, and International Studies departments, as well as International Government Information Collections work. Brett is a past coordinator of the GODORT International Documents Task Force, incoming secretary for the ACRL Law and Political Science section, and an executive board member for the Iowa Library Association. Brett has taught library research skills in a variety of contexts for more than 15 years. Devika Levy is the Sales and Outreach Manager for World Bank Publications. She has more than 20 years of experience in educational media, including 12 years at National Geographic in the school publishing, educational video, and digital media divisions. She has been with World Bank Publications for 6 years. With that, I'd like to turn things over to Devika.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Our objective today is to provide you with some information on ACRL's new framework for information literacy and to show you some ways that the World Bank eLibrary and other intergovernmental websites can be used to teach the concepts presented in the framework. So before Brett begins, I'd like to start with a little bit of background about the World Bank and the World Bank eLibrary for those who are not familiar with them. So the World Bank was established in 1944 and is a vital source of financial and technical assistance to developing countries around the world. We're not a bank in the ordinary sense, but a unique partnership to reduce poverty and to support development. The World Bank Group has 2 goals for the world to achieve by the year 2030. They are to end extreme poverty and to promote shared prosperity. We offer support to developing countries through policy advice and research and analysis, in addition to financial and technical assistance. And the World Bank Group consists of 5 institutions managed by their member countries. So what is the World Bank eLibrary? I'll give you a brief introduction. The World Bank eLibrary is the World Bank's official subscription-based publishing platform. It provides easy discovery and access of World Bank publications and research. It differs from our main World Bank website and our open access repository in that it offers a variety of personalization and added value features for using World Bank content. It was originally launched in 2003 and was specifically developed to meet the unique needs of libraries, researchers, and the academic community. It's used by the world's top academic institutions, international and government agencies, think tanks, and NGOs. So what's in the World Bank eLibrary? As far as content, the eLibrary contains all World Bank publications, journals, and research since the 1990s. You'll find our complete backlist of books, including chapters for the latest titles. We publish around 125 books per year. World Bank eLibrary also has thousands of working papers and other research. We've just added a new collection of economic outlooks. We also publish 2 journals, and those are published by Oxford University Press on behalf of the World Bank, and they are the World Bank Economic Review and the World Bank Research Observer. And eLibrary has a complete backlist of journal articles with no embargoes. Our content covers more than 200 countries and economies at all income levels, and we have a special emphasis on low and middle income countries. In total, we have more than 13,000 items in the World Bank eLibrary. Our research and publications cover a broad range of social science topics related to poverty reduction and economic development. These topics include public health, education, climate change, energy, and gender, as well as extensive coverage on emerging markets, international economics, trade, growth, and finance. There are many ways to access content straight from the home page. You can browse by country, region, topic, or content type, such as books, journals, or working papers. You can go into the quick or advanced search. You can browse new titles. You can also see what's popular among other users, or you can even go to your personal account for quick retrieval of content you've saved. The eLibrary is powered by metadata, which is hyperlinked and appears here in red. So users can conduct a new search by clicking on any item that you see that's red and hyperlinked, such as the author's name or keyword. And the eLibrary searches on full text as well as this metadata. Altmetric scores have been added recently, which track activity on social media, blogs, and other ways our publications are in the news. And Brett will talk more about this later. Here's an example of a topic browse. The top arrow is pointing at some background information we provide about the country, region, or topic. The second arrow on the left shows the quick links to other World Bank pages that are related, such as World Bank data, projects, and blogs. On the right, you'll see the arrow showing multiple options for filtering and faceting your search results. The browse and search results contain a lot of information, so you can quickly determine what's right for you, such as the content type, you can expand the abstract, and more. This is an example of a country browse, and the arrow points to key data from the World Development Indicators, so you can see them at a glance. The same is available for our regions. So clicking on an indicator will bring up a time series chart similar to this one, and we'll be integrating much more data in the coming months so researchers not only find the publications that are relevant to their research topics, but they'll also find related data all within the World Bank eLibrary. So this is our Browse Books page, which is organized by series. Clicking on a series name will bring up a brief description as well as all the titles in the series. And we have similar pages for journals and our working papers and other research. As I mentioned, we've just added some new economic outlooks. I also mentioned that eLibrary offers personal accounts, which is, you can see the account circled at the top of the page, for saving favorite content and saving search results. So you can set up content alerts by series, topics, or even when a new item is added that meets your saved search criteria. When running your saved searches, all new items since your last search will appear, along with your original search results. In the next couple months, we'll be adding full text, so no downloading will be needed. And content is already available for all titles as PDFs and for EPUB for our recent titles. Among its many benefits, the full text or HTML files will allow figures to be enlarged or browsed. And you can see that there's a circle around the forward and backward button, and that will allow you to scroll through the figures. All World Bank copyrighted content is made available under a CC BY license, so it can be easily used, reused, and shared widely without further permission as long as the World Bank has given attribution. And because the eLibrary is designed for libraries, we offer many services, such as indexing in Google and the major library discovery services like WorldCat, Ex Libris Primo, Summon, and many others. We offer MARC records and alerts, downloadable metadata. All content that's downloaded can be kept in perpetuity. We offer Counter for compliant usage reports, link resolvers, and many other services for librarians. As far as subscription information, eLibrary is only available at the institutional level. We do not offer individual subscriptions. The subscription period is 12 months and is typically based on a calendar cycle, or it can be prorated through December 31st. Our prices are based on the number of FTE or authorized users and the institution type. We offer geographic and consortia discounts, and free trials are available for libraries at any time. You can subscribe through us directly, your preferred subscription agent, or select library consortia. So now I'll turn it over to Brett, who will give a presentation about the information literacy frameworks.
Great, thank you, Devika. Hi everyone, my name is Brett Cloyd. I'm at the University of Iowa in Iowa City. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm really looking forward to sharing ways I've been using the World Bank eLibrary and other intergovernmental information to help students with their information literacy skills. I think that the recent adoption by ACRL of the framework for information literacy provides a really great opportunity for us to think about our teaching work and begin conversations with our librarian colleagues, campus partners, and publishers to figure out what it really means. I'm looking at the poll results here for our information literacy question. About 22% of you are very familiar with the framework. 53% have a basic understanding. 17% don't use it, but they're aware of it. And 8% said they've never heard anything or know anything about the framework. So I think we've got a good group of people here, and I think we'll try to address the needs that each of you have. All right. I've got my phone, I've got my mouse, and I've got my notes. So I'm doing a juggling act, but here's slide 2. So this is the definition from the framework. It covers a lot of ground. It includes information about integrating abilities, encompassing the reflective discovery of information, understanding how information is produced and valued. So you can see it's a little daunting to put together a presentation that answers all of these types of questions. But fortunately, the frames are a little more straightforward than that. I wanted to give a little background on the framework. This was approved by ACRL board this year. So in some ways, it's brand new. I know that it was in discussion for at least a year. People have been talking about this and making suggestions, and we finally got approval. ACRL has placed this within a constellation of information literacy documents. It extends the 2000 information literacy competency standards that we've been working with for nearly 15 years. So those are still in place, but we might want to think about how the framework either builds or takes us in new directions. For me, I especially like the contrast that's discussed between novice learners and experts. I think that keeping this concept in mind can help us with our teaching efforts, and I'll be providing lots of examples during my talk. I also want to say that flexibility is in the document. It's strongly emphasized, and that includes our teaching styles, suggesting that we try out new teaching ideas, work with our peers and our partners like faculty across higher education, as well as with our professional associations like we're doing today. All right, this is the picture of the year for me. I didn't see this on Facebook. I was at an actual library, a conference presentation, and my colleague, Erica Raber, pulled this up, and I was like, hey, this explains what I do. So I've really liked this image since I first saw it. We can sort of imagine each frame in the framework as a threshold. That's kind of the middle space where it says threshold. And we need to help students pass through it to better understand information, to grasp the concepts in the fields, and this can help them become more information literate. I'm referencing an article by Townsend, actually I think it's the ACRL weblog, that takes a look at threshold concepts, which is something that the framework is based on. And it also looks at some of the criticisms surrounding the threshold concepts. But really it's generally supportive of the framework, and I would definitely recommend it to you, especially if you're kind of new on the conversation. I think they do a nice job of summarizing the ideas and how we can proceed. Oh, I'll mention here I've got a bibliography at the end for things that you might want to take a look at. So the graphic itself, I want to talk about it a little bit more. It identifies challenges to teachers and librarians with the fact that teachers do not, or learners do not start at the same place. They learn at different paces. You know, and I know all of you experience this where you're teaching to different learning points. It can be really hard. Plus, you're just seeing students maybe in a limited context, maybe a one-shot class. So, you know, I can imagine all of you might see yourselves or your students at different points in this progression. I, for one, when I was getting started with my presentation, I was sort of that person going around in circles trying to figure out where I'm supposed to go. So I think I've passed through the threshold, and I'm doing the presentation, so I have some expertise, or at least I'm trying to share what I've learned through this process. Okay, I wanted to put this in the context of some of my teaching experience, because I think this has informed how I've been looking at the framework for the last year or so. For you, think about where you're teaching and where some of these ideas might fit for you. I teach a one-credit course called Library Strategies for International Research that's geared towards international studies students, usually juniors and seniors. We have 8 weeks to talk about a wide variety of information sources and strategies, and I think the framework, I started adapting some of those principles this semester. I think it's going to be really helpful for me. A lot of us are teaching one-shot classes. For me, I'm in international studies, political science, and geography for the most part. These will be undergraduate and graduate students. You might want to think about the issues differently depending on your program or whether they're undergraduate or graduate. And also, as part of a research instruction department, I'm assigned to select first-year rhetoric classes. So this will be students who need help with basic information literacy skills. And that's going to be a different context than some of my other venues. And like most of you, I also meet with students in research consultations. So I think the framework gives us some opportunity in each of these contexts. One other context I want to mention is this intergovernmental organization, intergovernmental information. That was part of our title, and I wanted to explain that a little bit before I get into the eLibrary. I have a quote here. My colleague Jim Church at UC Berkeley wrote an article in spring 2009 for Documents to the People magazine, and in there his quote was, "What, after all, is the big deal about international organizations?" Well, I think in the article, I know he talks about what the big deal is, and I just wanted to share that with you, that we can expect to find really good information about standards, law, development issues, human rights, aid, and children's issues, among others. And I recommend that article to students that I work with because I think it's really informative. I also wanted to say that international and intergovernmental are sometimes used interchangeably. I'm aiming for intergovernmental, but I might slip up on occasion, so please forgive me. So the World Bank, we heard a little bit about this from Devika and the eLibrary. The World Bank is a large intergovernmental organization. It's part of the United Nations system. I'll be talking a little bit about the eLibrary as a tool or platform we can use to teach information literacy concepts in a variety of settings. Besides being asked to talk about it, I think the eLibrary's focus and its purpose help make it really useful in this setting. It's also helpful that the eLibrary can be used as a gateway to other World Bank information materials. We saw a couple examples there with the World Bank's data and some other sources. I think leveraging these connections can really help students advance and break through some of the frames they need to break through. Okay, so ACRL identified 6 frames to make up the framework. And they didn't list them in any particular order. They're not ranked. None has emphasis, but they're organized alphabetically. For our purpose here, I thought it would be useful to number them. I don't necessarily want to make this a precedent for ACRL, but just for keeping track of the presentation, make sure we're all on the same slide, I've just chosen to do that. There is some overlap between frames, and we'll talk about that in a few instances. And keep in mind that if we can help students master or pass through the frame, they will be more successful in their work. And as we go through, I'll be giving just a real short introduction for each frame. I've got a few keywords to mention. Frame number 1 is authority is constructed and contextual. I wanted to highlight a few words here. If you're interested, I hate to send you away, but if you're interested, the ACRL Framework page, I think, does a nice job of describing these. They might be useful, especially if you're getting started here. Some of the keywords of the frame include authority, constructed, creator's expertise, credibility, evaluated, information need, context, and authority. And authority is sort of different types or levels of authority. All right. So what is the authority of the World Bank? This is something that I would recommend my students to do if they're going to be spending some time with World Bank information. This is a UN system chart that I share with students. It identifies the 5 parts of the World Bank group. It might be a little small for you here. I've got a link on the slide if you want to go to it later. So it also shows the relationship between the bank and the UN's Economic and Social Council. There might be other units you want to cover as you look at a document like this. For example, some of the UN work that the World Bank does might have some overlap with the UN Environment Program, the UN Development Program, the IMF, or the regional commissions. So this can be a chance to introduce this information in a meaningful way by showing relationships within the org chart. So that's something that I share with students frequently. My next slide is sort of challenging authority. I didn't come up with this idea right away, but I know that in some contexts the World Bank is controversial for its work. So one way to depict that is to take a look at Google Images. I did a search for World Bank in Google Images to see what I would get. And one of the filters that popped up was protest. And so here are a sample of pictures from Google Image. I think the authority frame gives us a chance to demonstrate that some scholars and citizens challenge the authority of our sources. And this is described in the frame. This type of source might also let students assess content with a skeptical stance. That's described a little further in the frame. By becoming aware that not everyone is supportive of the World Bank, that of course there are disagreements. So we have a couple different kinds of authority. We have the authority of the institution. We have the authority as represented in a Google image. We have the authority as represented with the eLibrary tool that perhaps a librarian or a faculty member will recommend to a class. So this is the home page. There are things that we can do when we're talking to students to look at the scope of the database. We've learned today about the regions, topics, and collection sections of the site and some of the different types of documents. And I think talking with students about this can be really helpful. Also, helping students understand that this content is all from the World Bank is a really important teaching point. It's not like going to Google and getting a variety of viewpoints or some of our scholarly databases. There'll be different publications. These are all either authored, edited, or published by the World Bank. Now here's an example of an exercise that you might take away and try. So maybe you have a student and you're trying to explain authority and expertise of authors. I started with an ebook in eLibrary written by Chong and Lopez de Solanes called Privatization in Latin America, Myths and Reality. The ebook gave me a fairly short author description, which I've included in the slide, that he's a senior research economist at the Inter-American Development Bank, which is part of the World Bank. Then I found a working paper that he did from 2002 that connected him with Georgetown. But these are all more than 10 years old, which is nice to have this information available. But if we want to learn more about Chong's impact on scholarship, we might want to find some other sources. And via Google Scholar, I pulled up his profile, and that was part of the University of Ottawa faculty page that he maintains. So you get a more extensive feel and flavor for his work and how he has built authority based on his past experiences. I think this still leaves open the question of what kind of learner will need Chong's type of information, his type of authority, but this is a conversation you might start having with faculty members and students by doing these types of exercises and thinking about the frame on authority. I think my first year rhetoric students would really struggle with a source like this, but my more advanced undergraduates and graduate students, they need to develop the familiarity. We have to find ways to help them do that. So I've got a little bit here about the authority of authors with search results. I think students really struggle with search results because there's uncertainty when they're presented with the information. One thing I highlight here is the document type is the first piece of information in the results in the eLibrary. but I think it's a little lighter tone, and it's not really the emphasis. I'm not sure what role it's playing there. I'd like to suggest that maybe using an icon, using some type of icon to measure distinction of sources might be useful. We'll have some examples a little bit later. It's worth noting that the authors in the eLibrary are generally considered experts in their field, but the expertise might be valued differently based on the learner and the information that they need, so definitely consider your audience. And keeping in mind the idea of skepticism and challenging sources, I frequently have students try different academic databases because they give different viewpoints. I don't think in most cases I would suggest eLibrary as my standalone research product when considering authority, because the secondary sources can help you see things that are peer-reviewed and have a wider scope. When students should use peer-reviewed scholarly sources will really depend on their information need, and limiting only to the World Bank eLibrary may also depend on the information need in consultation with faculty members. Teaching students a little something about scholarly databases and how to use them is an important part of helping them become information literate. It's related to today's topic, and it helps students better understand authority. Okay, I'm going to move on to frame number 2, information creation as process. Some of the keywords here include sharing, delivery, message, the resulting product of students' work. The library includes a variety of tools to help users and the World Bank itself share information. It's important to note that the eLibrary contains the work of the World Bank. There isn't any content from other sources. The content's from World Bank staff, economists, and experts. Some titles are also authored by the World Bank itself, and they might not get any author information. But I think sometimes there can be a mismatch between student information needs and the authority and expertise of the content. My rhetoric students may really struggle with the eLibrary. So if we can find ways to link more informal sources, that can really help in this area. I think blog sources linked from the eLibrary topic and country pages can help. The blogs are from experts from the World Bank, but they're a little less formal than the books or the journal articles. And I also think that the eLibrary results screens can help a lot here. This is an example of one of the topics pages. I like to demonstrate this type of page to students first. Note that the background paragraph orients users about the topic. This one's on water sources. The links to the free World Bank topic and World Bank blog on the subject are good places to go to find general background information. Students might also get some ideas about how authors from the World Bank might collaborate. The filters help students imagine how they might find more specific information. And understanding the document types and explaining the topics might give students new perspectives about their value. I like to encourage students to set up an account in different databases. This can build practice as far as adding favorites, sending emails, and setting up citation alerts. It's a little bit hidden, so I've highlighted it with a red box today. But these can be really useful tools. Emphasize saving favorites can be a useful part of the information creation process because it really is the foundation for a student's reading list or their consulted sources. It also helps them to build an information memory about their work. Here I'm going to talk a little bit about alternative metrics within the creation frame. We all know that information is being disseminated and created in different ways, the explosion of social media, and altmetrics are a tool that helps collect that kind of information. It's similar to being cited in a paper, but it's much more informal. It's available from some citations in the eLibrary. I've been noticing them recently. Some items might have active altmetric activity. Then a few months later, as more people know about it, it might be cited in a source. So it's become part of the scholarly publication process. It's also really popular in conferences and workshops lately, I've noticed. Hand in hand with this is the need to accept ambiguity surrounding the value of information. This is a tweet that I found from Betty Beekeeper. She showed up in Altmetrics and World Bank, and there might be some ambiguity. What does it mean that she likes the item? Does she have expertise or authority? What does her Twitter feed tell us? Certainly she's passionate about climate change and environmental issues, but does she fit into our students' information needs? Does it help produce skepticism or doubt about the information? Is it neutral? Is it even interesting? I think the creation frame gives us a chance to talk about these issues with students and with faculty in ways that we may have struggled to explain before. Frame 3 is information has value. Some of the keywords here include commodity, education, influence, value in negotiating and understanding the world, legal and socioeconomic value. I wanted first to talk about the value of sources. In some contexts, this will be your juniors and seniors at colleges and universities becoming aware that when they graduate, they're not going to have access to a lot of the information sources they have when they're at college. However, it's worth noting that the World Bank makes many publications available for free on the web through their open knowledge repository and other platforms. And students are more aware of this free versus premium service by way of phone apps and similar models. It's a good thing to talk about with them that says, the World Bank information may still be available. You can still use it. It just might be in different formats. I really do believe that intergovernmental information can be a means to educate, influence, negotiate, and understand the world, but I think it requires a degree of information literacy and a crossing of the thresholds for students to become more confident and aware of specific sources. Many, probably all of my students, they tell me that they had no idea that tools like this exist and that they were available at their university. On this next section, I'll slightly broaden my focus to talk about information about other countries and how people seek and use this information. I wanted to talk a little bit about Google. This is a snippet from Google search results. For many of us, Google is the front door to the world. I frequently have students use the free US Google site to try and find country information. I'll see Google likely has a different value of information than the World Bank in terms of what gets displayed. This specific example has a fair amount of informational content, and many students confront tourism and consumer-oriented information when they want to look for information about a country's development progress or transportation issues, among others. I try to note to students that when they search the U.S. on a university campus with their personalized account, the search results page is personalized. I sometimes use this opportunity to talk about Eli Pariser's filter bubble. For the most part, I don't think this is as big an issue with the eLibrary. I'm going to skip the slide in the sake for time. And I'm going to go right here to the World Bank's page on Turkey. This is the eLibrary page on Turkey. As Devika noted, it includes links to several free World Bank sources, the country page, data, blog, and projects of the World Bank. Plus, there are titles in the eLibrary that talk about Turkey. Gathering all this information in one place for students can be very valuable. And I can get here by navigating the Regions tab and identifying the country of interest. I wanted to highlight the topic filter here to help students think about certain development areas they might be working on. The top 3 are listed over on the right, and you can select more to see a longer list. Seeing which issues have the most hits may help students identify important topics that are facing a country. Browsing this page in an early stage of research might help students develop better research topics. Okay, number 4 in our frames is research as inquiry. The main thing here is to think about inquiry as increasingly complex and new questions that students will be asking. It's sort of going well. It's starting to progress. Get my right button here. So students, they might begin their work from different starting points, as we discovered at the beginning of the talk with the graphic. Students may also begin to use more sophisticated tools as they progress. A librarian will be able to help students differently depending on the research situation, like the type of class, or whether you're meeting a student for a consultation, whether you have a extensive work with the student over a semester. And students, they might develop different questions based on the information tools they have. I have a few suggestions for starting points here, whether it's your library catalog, a scholarly database, or the eLibrary. And of course, there's Google. So we have World Bank records, MARC records, incorporated into our Primo Discovery tool at Iowa. This is a screenshot that shows the results with the filter set as World Bank for Creator. It looks really neat and organized, but when you start adding noise of other types of sources, the experience can be more complicated. I think this method of access helps students who may not be familiar with the eLibrary, gets them into content about the World Bank without having to go there. But if students are more and more interested in World Bank's publications, they're probably better off visiting the eLibrary so they can do different types of searches that are available there. That means you have to find ways to introduce the World Bank eLibrary, whether it's visiting classes, sending email to faculty. There are different strategies that you can use. I want to talk a little bit about scholarly databases. These are really good sources for information about intergovernmental organizations. There's lots of content here in PACE International or Worldwide Political Science Abstract about the World Bank and the United Nations. They may even include World Bank content itself, so that might be another way to get people into the eLibrary. You may have noticed if you're a ProQuest customer that over on the far right you start to see discovery suggestions. So the eLibrary, ebooks, government documents, newspaper stories. I've noticed that the World Bank publications are showing up under eLibrary ebooks, which I thought was interesting. Well, I need to talk to some people about whether we can get links to eLibrary there. That would make more sense for us. But I've talked with Devika earlier, and she mentioned that World Bank does not send all their books to eLibrary, so going to the eLibrary makes a little more sense. I apologize for the similarities between the names eLibrary and eLibrary. Gets me a little confused. I've also included a search results screenshot for a journal article in Worldwide Political Science Abstract. I do this just to emphasize the fact that students, they're confronting this information and they need to make quick decisions about its value and whether it's going to help them with their research. So building some citation skills into our coursework, I think, is important and helpful. I mentioned the lack of a icon to describe the document type in the eLibrary. Here, ProQuest is using a cap icon to indicate a scholarly source. So that's, I think, kind of a nice touch. But students also are going to be struggling here with finding access to the full text. They'll need to know about our SFX link resolver called InfoLink. Versus eLibrary, the full text is right there. It's a little easier. So there are definitely some challenges that are presented to us and we need to think about and work on with students. I'm returning back to the eLibrary full record for a book, working paper. I've highlighted some text towards the bottom here because I think this can really help with our inquiry frame. It puts our issues in a regional context. It talks about what region the countries described in this title are in, other related countries, the topics that are facing this country on this issue, and it just gives you some additional ways to get students asking questions and helping them fulfill their need to perform inquiry in their subject areas. I think this is a good match of the inquiry frame. All right. Frame number 5 is scholarship is conversation. I think there's a lot of opportunities in this frame. It includes information on students having new insights and discoveries and understanding that there's a sustained discourse going on in fields of research. Here's a few samples of things that I've been working on with students that I think have been helpful and I wanted to share with you today. Think about the scholarship as a conversation can be a really useful frame to share with students. The one that I sometimes start out with is talking about the distinction between their assistant and their associate professors. What is the role of tenure? How does scholarship impact their professor's work? For many students, their professor is just their teacher, and they might not know of their professor's other time constraints. I like to try using a number of bibliography-related examples in my teaching. You can offer a bibliography full of citation that includes items from a variety of document types or from a favorite database. You might ask students to answer some questions about their types of sources, ask them to identify the author in a citation, or identify which one is from a newspaper. I think students are tuned into bibliographies to some extent. This might be their initial mining of citations in Wikipedia. One of the nice things about the eLibrary content is that there are bibliographies on a variety of topics that you can find in books and articles. These might be useful tools you can use in your instruction work. And I think that talking about citation tools can fit into the larger goals like writing their research paper. Working with the faculty member through the course of an assignment can also help you get your projects off the ground. I also try to find ways to reduce student anxiety about contributing to the conversation, both in class and sort of the academic conversation, by finding some collaborative activities where students can work together or give short presentations. I think if they have more awareness of one another by talking to each other and their topics, it's much easier for them to give short presentations. I just wanted to put the scholarly publishing issue in context here by looking at a page from the Oxford University Press that hosts the World Bank Economic Review. The press publishes on behalf of the World Bank, and there's a little more information on this page about the eLibrary site. I bring it up here because I like students to take a look at the About This journal to get a sense of its scope and its purpose. The rights and permissions as far as copyright issues go, editorial board, who is monitoring the work of this title, and the instructions for authors. I think they are consumers of information. They're looking and reading at articles like this, helping them see how they are created, and the conversation that's taking place among scholarly communities is a really important part of this frame and on scholarship in general. I've got, let's see, a couple screenshots here to show you. There's a Google Scholar example. I'm highlighting the cited by feature in Google Scholar so your students can get a sense of what kind of results, or I'm sorry, what kind of authors and works are citing this. And I think that the import into a bibliography manager tool can also be really helpful. So you might want to give those a shot in your presentations. Back in the eLibrary, just to highlight students to the database tools to help them create bibliographies so you can download citations. They can be an important part of a visit with students. Explaining this in various contexts, so getting students to think about downloading citations in the library catalog, Google Scholar, and the eLibrary might help them reinforce the concept and sort of build it into their practice. Before we leave here, I'll also mention citation alerts. This is part of the ongoing conversation that's taking place among scholars. You can see what new materials are being published. So I think this fits the creation frame. Students find that materials match their information need in one database. Setting alerts in that database for new content makes a lot of sense, especially if they're continuing to study the topic. Maybe they're working on a senior project or something that lasts a little bit longer than a regular assignment. Okay, we're at the last frame. Let me just catch up here. I'm reading my notes. Okay, so frame number 6, I'll be looking at searching as strategic exploration. Some of the keywords here include evaluation, information sources. My favorite in the frames is the mental flexibility concept. There's also alternate avenues and new understanding. I have several ideas for working on the exploration frame. I'm a big fan of concept maps when I can fit them into a class visit. I think it helps encourage students' creativity and the collaborative nature that I like to see in classes I teach. Asking students to share their concept with a classmate can help students follow through with the activity and make it more meaningful. I like to introduce concept maps. I might show a YouTube video or work through an example with a class. You can give students a printed example or talk with the student's previous experience with concept maps. I've only had one student experience a really hard time with this activity, so I'd be curious if you get much pushback on this. But for the most part, it's been a pretty positive thing for me to do. I've been trying to create more small group discussions in classes I visit, and I try to plan ahead of time by asking instructors to share a Google form with students where I'll ask them questions about their research. I've highlighted this on the slide. This might be considered flipping the classroom. I picked up this technique at an ALA unconference. By learning what a student's research needs are ahead of time, I can form small groups of students with a similar research ideas so I can get them working together and they're natural partners. I can also specify databases relevant to students' information needs by having some time to consider their work. I don't know about you, but some of the worst experiences I've had where I've got 15 students who have 15 different topics and trying to present a meaningful class session with them is really hard. So this has helped me address that problem. There might be groups that could benefit from the eLibrary in the classes I teach, so we could recommend that. And there might be some examples where students are working on very topical issues where the topic sections in eLibrary might be good launching points. Okay, see if I've got anything else to say on this frame. Yeah, I think I'll leave that there. I'm going to wrap up my talk about the framework and about frames. And thank you for attending today's webinar. Hopefully I've been able to demonstrate that the World Bank eLibrary can be a useful starting point in teaching information literacy concepts, especially as they're discussed in the framework. I think the framework can be a good conversation starter for librarians, faculty, higher education, and publishers. I hope we can continue the conversation. And I hope some ideas here might lead to future emphasis on information literacy and government information. And also, I'll be at ALA later this month in San Francisco, so if anyone wants to meet up and talk about some of this, I'd definitely be open for having some coffee and doing that. So I'm thinking we're ready. Oh, let me tell you this. I have a works cited list here. Here's my Google URL. We should have some of this content up pretty soon. And I'm probably ready to pass it back to Jen and to Devika and do some work with our questions. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Brett. You've given us some great information about the frameworks and some also really good information about the eLibrary site, which we will keep your suggestions in mind as we develop the site, and we'll also bring up some of your suggestions and keep the information literacy frameworks in mind as we develop the site and talk to our library advisory board. So I'm going to put up our contact information. If you have any questions and would like to contact us, Brett's information is there, as well as mine and our customer service account for those who are interested in requesting a price quote or a free trial or information about the World Bank eLibrary. So we do have a couple minutes for some questions. So Rachel Kelly had asked if the Creative Commons licensing is included for for-profit schools. And the answer is yes, as long as the content is copyrighted with the World Bank copyright notice, then it is under the CC BY license if it's from the World Bank eLibrary. And so then you can share it and reuse it and redistribute it without asking for further permission. We do have a terms and conditions link on the eLibrary website, which gives more specific details about some of the other content that is not World Bank content and how to attribute it if it is. Let's see, we had another question. Actually, this is a comment from Wendy, and it's a comment for Brett. When you
Okay.
were discussing the work by Chong, she mentions that, and no doubt that Chong wrote that by himself, which is another point that students don't realize. So maybe you would want to comment on that.
Yeah, let me pull up my notes there just a second. Um, the eLibrary book, the privatization in Latin America.
Or possibly the working paper?
Yeah. Oh, right. That's a good point. I might have pulled that out of context a little bit.
So that's another thing to teach your students is that there's also the author's perspective, not just the institutional perspective.
Right, definitely.
Okay, here's another question. Are the World Bank data sets available in eLibrary? They aren't at the moment, but that's something we're working on. We're looking to bring in as many or as much as possible from our open data website that is relevant to the content in eLibrary. So keep an eye out for that in the next coming months, and it'll be something that will be a work in progress, but we are looking to bring in some of the relevant data sets from World Development Indicators.
Oh, great.
We'll also be looking to add some of the underlying data to our publications, so you'll start to see more data being added to the site. For now, as I showed earlier on, there are those quick links to the key top statistics for countries and regions, and you'll start to see more, like I said, in the coming months. Let's see, another question. Will this webcast be archived and shared? And the answer is yes. The video or the recording should be available in about a week, and it will be on YouTube. And both we and I believe Choice will be sending out the link when that's available.
Great.
Okay, and there was a question about the bibliography, which is up on the screen now. We also needed to correct one slide earlier on that I think was Brett's visualization of how students learn. I think maybe that was linking out to a UN site, so we'll need to correct that. Okay, and Wendy added another comment. She says that she meant to say all authority deserves to be questioned. So
definitely.
Another good point. So let me just see if there are any other questions. Another question is, can we email the PowerPoint? The PowerPoint is quite large, but we can try to get that to you in maybe a couple of separate emails. If you're interested, please type in the chat and we can email those to you individually. Otherwise, the recording, as I mentioned, will be available and it will have all the slides throughout that. I think those are all the questions, unless any others come back up. Let's see. Oh, the concept maps. There are questions about whether the concept maps can be included so that they can be shared.
Like examples of concept maps? Because I didn't show any in particular here.
Can Brett share the YouTube video on the concept maps and share his worksheets?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay. Okay, I think that's it. So we're almost out of time. I'm going to turn it back over to Jen, but thank you all for joining us today. At the World Bank, our aim is to have World Bank content used as much as possible so we can reach our twin goals of ending extreme poverty and boosting shared prosperity. For the subscribers in our audience, we hope that you will consider using eLibrary when you teach your information literacy strategies to your students. And if you're not subscribed, we hope you'll get in touch with us for more information on the eLibrary, and we'd be happy to set up a free trial for you or answer any other questions you have. So thanks again, and turning it back over to Jennifer.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to give both Brett and Devika a virtual round of applause for spending time with us today and sharing some great information. And again, we have recorded the program, so you'll get an email from me that will include instructions on how to access that version when it becomes available. And thanks again to all our participants for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this session and have a great rest of your afternoon.